Someone had come in, I'm assuming it's whoever unplugged the camera, and seen that the camera was unplugged and did not want to be seen, and they took their hand and they shoved it up into the ceiling.
Hi everyone, I'm Kevin and this is Just Thought Lounge. This is the true crime channel that delivers well-balanced, serious coverage of the cases that really make you think. Our attention was drawn to the case today from a channel member. It takes us to Raleigh, North Carolina in 2006, where 29-year-old young mother and accountant Michelle Young lived in a beautiful home with her husband of 3 years, Jason, and their 2-year-old daughter, Cassidy. Despite a marriage on the rocks, Michelle is 4.5 months pregnant with their second child and optimistic that better days lie ahead. But that was not the case. When Michelle is found dead after a severe beating in her home while her husband is away for business, suspicions are directed towards Jason almost immediately, and his refusal to assist investigators in seeking his wife's killer raises even more red flags. But he was out of state during the time that Michelle was killed. Or was he? Let's take a look. Michelle's sorority sister and close friend Shelley arrived at the Youngs' home on Birchleaf Drive at around 6:30 on the evening of the 2nd of November 2006. She came to have dinner and to watch Grey's Anatomy on television with Michelle. The women had dinner, bathed 2-year-old Cassidy, diapered her, and dressed her in fuzzy pink pajamas. They chatted about an argument Michelle and Jason had had over Michelle's mother Linda staying at their home for the majority of the time between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Jason was not a fan of these plans, or his mother-in-law apparently. Shelley said later that she had an eerie feeling that evening. She asked Michelle if she was scared to be alone. Michelle said, Jason's heard a lot of noises lately around the house, but Michelle's thoughts were, if someone's going to break in and their intention is to kill you, then that's what they're going to do. Shelley found this response unsettling. She said she felt like the two were being watched and asked Michelle to walk her to her vehicle before she left. That was the last time she saw her friend alive. At about noon the next day, Meredith Fisher, the younger sister of Michelle Young, retrieved a message on her phone from her brother-in-law Jason. He left on a short business trip the afternoon before and wanted her to stop by their house quickly and pick up some printouts that he has left sitting in full view in his home office. The papers are of a selection of designer handbags that he was thinking about as a late anniversary gift for Michelle. He had absent-mindedly left them out. If Michelle saw them, the surprise would be ruined. Meredith thought this request was a bit odd. Their wedding anniversary was 3 weeks prior, and Jason had left for his trip over 17 hours earlier. Surely it was too late, and Michelle would have seen them by now. Meredith lived only 15 minutes away and had the time, so she made her way over to the Young house on Birchleaf Drive, arriving sometime just after 1 p.m. Meredith didn't have her set of house keys with her, so she forced her way in by lifting the garage door. The first sign that something was amiss was immediate. When Meredith ducked under the door, she sees that Michelle's car was still parked in the garage. Also, their dog, usually left out in their secured backyard, was barking loudly from inside. Meredith went through the unlocked door from the garage to the house. Walking through the kitchen, Meredith noted Michelle's purse on the floor, another unsettling indication that her sister was not at work where she should be. She calls her sister's name multiple times, but has no response. When she reached the second floor, Meredith saw what she thinks at first may be dark red hair dye, or possibly red nail polish splatter on the carpeting as she ascends the stairs. But as she follows that line of sight to her little niece's bathroom, she sees red stains all over the floor. These are tiny footprints marking up the bathroom floor and parts of the surrounding carpet. Then she makes her way into the master bedroom, where the scene was much worse. Michelle was laying face down on the floor between the bed and the closet. Meredith immediately reached for the phone and dialed 911. As she does so, the comforter on the bed rustles and out popped Cassidy, who had been hiding underneath. She clung to her aunt while the call was placed for emergency services.
Location emergency?
I need an ambulance.
Okay.
It's an emergency.
What address are you at, ma'am? Ma'am, what's your phone number in case I lose you? Problem, tell me exactly what happened.
I think my sister's dead.
Okay, tell me what happened, ma'am.
I have no idea. Oh my God.
All right, stay on the phone with me, please. What's your name?
Meredith Fisher.
Meredith.
And this is the Young address. Oh my God.
Meredith, listen to me, please.
Yeah.
Are you with the patient now?
Yes, and her daughter.
Okay. How old is the patient?
And there's blood everywhere. She's 28, 29.
28.
Should I try to move her?
Listen to me, ma'am.
Yeah,
I'm going to
sir.
tell you what to do, but
Okay.
you need to calm down so we can help her. You said there's blood everywhere?
Yes.
All right. Is she conscious?
No, I don't think so. Should I try to help her?
Listen to me, ma'am.
I'm listening.
Is she breathing?
I don't think so.
Have you checked?
Michelle, she's cold.
Okay. Listen to me. Did you see what happened?
I don't know. Kathy, come here, sweetie. I'm here with her daughter.
Okay.
There's like blood footprints all over the house.
Okay,
Of my
listen to
daughter,
me.
like her daughter's little footprints.
Okay, listen to me. What's your first name?
Meredith?
All right, Meredith.
Yes, sir.
Did you see what happened?
I just came here on a fluke. I usually, don't come here during the day.
Okay.
She shouldn't be home. She should be at work. Like,
Okay, listen to me.
yes, sir. Hey, did you know what happened to Mommy? Did she fall?
She got babies everywhere, and she got...
Do you think she's beyond any help?
I don't know. Honestly,
You don't know? All right.
I'm normally very good under
Okay.
pressure.
We're going to tell you what to do then, okay?
Yes, sir.
Are you right by her now?
I'm keeping her daughter out of there.
Okay. All right, so you're not with her?
I'm right outside the
All
bedroom.
right. Can you get her daughter secured? Can you carry the phone into where she's at?
Yes.
All right. Can you secure her daughter?
Cassidy, sweetie, can you stay in your room for 2 seconds, okay?
Okay.
Okay. Can you close the door for 2 seconds? I'll be right back in there, okay, sweetie?
All right. Can you get her on her back?
Okay. Oh, my God. Michelle? I don't think so. She's so heavy.
All right, see if you can get her on her back.
I really think she's dead.
Pardon?
I really think she's dead.
Okay. You can't roll her over?
Not easily.
All right, you're going to have to try.
Hang on, I'm trying to see if I can get her pulse.
We got to try to do CPR if we can get her on the back, Meredith.
So she's ice cold.
She's cold? Okay. All right.
And her body is stiff.
Okay. Then don't try. If she's cold, then this...
Oh my God,
Probably nothing else you can do.
Should I not touch anything?
All right. Try not to touch anything more than you did. Was anything out of place or unusual when you came in?
This place does not look like what it normally looks like.
Okay. What?
There's blood in the bed.
Okay. All right. Try not to touch anything else, okay?
Okay, I just moved a pillow.
Just leave everything exactly where it is then.
Meredith was not able to turn over her sister and attempt any life-saving measures. It was undoubtedly too late for these efforts anyways. Michelle was rigid and cold to the touch. Meredith ushered Cassidy outside of the house where the two waited. The toddler was not injured in any way. According to her aunt, little Cassidy did not appear distressed or traumatized at this point in time. We can't know what, if anything, she saw, but she was still talkative when emergency services first arrived, mentioning her mom had boo-boos and, according to Meredith, even referencing her daddy, although the context here is unclear. It's difficult to hear in the recorded call, but Meredith says that Cassidy mentioned her father while on the phone with the 911 dispatcher. She said she heard her say daddy early in the call. When she asked her further questions, Cassidy was using the pronoun he. There on that day, when we were in the fire truck, she continued to talk about her father, Meredith says. And later when we got back to my house, a child psychologist was there, but she had just shut down. What is curious about Cassidy when her aunt discovers her under the bed covers is that she is remarkably clean. Despite tiny footprints made with bare feet visible across whole areas of the flooring in the master bedroom and into the child's bathroom, there is not a drop of visible blood on her, and she was found by her aunt wearing a pair of booties. Cassidy was dressed in the same pajamas that Michelle and Shelley had dressed her in for bed the night before. Testing would later find trace amounts of blood on these pajamas, but nothing visible to the naked eye. Cassidy was also no longer wearing a diaper despite not being potty trained. Meredith says that she did not clean her up upon finding her at the scene. So somebody, after the attack on her mother had taken place, had cared enough to clean up the little girl before fleeing the scene. Footprints on the carpet leading to the child's bathroom abruptly stopped a few feet from the entrance, only to appear again inside on the tiling and a small step stool by the sink. The child was perhaps lifted these few feet inside the door. The markings are scattered in a chaotic pattern around the sink and the bathtub, and smudges are visible on the walls at about toddler height. Behind the door, more markings were found, indicating that Cassidy had been inside with the door closed at some point. There were a few drops on a towel next to the bathtub, but no traces of blood were found in the tub itself. A garden hose sitting out on the pathway in the yard was found dripping, and a portion of the walkway appeared to have been hosed down. However, no traces of blood were found on the hose, on the walkway, or on the ground nearby. Despite the messy nature of the scene, it appeared isolated to the second floor of the house where the master bedroom was located. Walking through the downstairs and the kitchen, there is no sign of distress. A sonogram of the Youngs' expected son is posted on the side of the fridge. There was no sign of forced entry. There were only 2 small droplets of blood found elsewhere in the home, which were on the doorknob that leads to the garage, and these were determined to be Michelle's. No other person's blood was detected anywhere near the scene. The young mother's autopsy revealed that she died of blunt force trauma inflicted with an unidentified heavy, likely rounded object. She was hit at least 30 times. It was a violent and brutal attack. There were many signs that Michelle did everything she could to fight back. The property and the surrounding neighborhood were searched for a weapon, but none was found. The medical examiner did not offer an opinion on the time of death, which would become a critical factor in the investigation. There was a blood trail from the bed to where Michelle lay on the floor next to the open closet. There was also blood on the linens, which suggested that she was attacked while sleeping in bed. However, she was found fully clothed in sweatpants and a hooded sweatshirt. There was 1 sock laying near to her on the bedroom floor, and her treadmill was turned on, though it was not running. If Michelle had already risen from bed for a morning workout at the time of the attack, it likely occurred closer to 5 or 6 a.m. than, say, 3 or 4 a.m. Although the blood testing revealed little, the scene offered other clues. In Michelle's left hand, the medical examiner retrieved a single strand of hair. A small clump of hair was also found under Michelle's body, which testing revealed was from the same person. A jewelry box in the master bedroom had 2 drawers removed, and DNA testing showed 4 markers that did not include either Michelle or her husband Jason's DNA. Meredith said that Michelle didn't really have a lot of fancy jewelry except for her wedding and engagement rings, and she never took those off. Both rings were missing from her body when she was found and were not recovered, though the missing items seem to have been a contradictory piece of this puzzle. The brutality of the attack itself suggested that this was more than a robbery. Blood splatter on the door of Jason's closet next to where Michelle lay indicated that it was closed when the attack occurred. When responders arrived at the scene, however, this door was sitting open, suggesting it had been purposefully accessed after the murder. Unlike the jewelry box, there were no items missing from the closet. Additional unidentified fingerprints were found in the house, including on the printouts of the purses that Jason had been considering as an anniversary gift. These were found on an office printer with 3 fingerprints. 1 matched Jason, and 2 others were unidentified. Scattered around the master bedroom were a handful of decorative pillows, most resting on the floor. Footwear impressions left in blood on 2 of these pillows showed 2 distinct shoe types corresponding to 2 sets of adult-sized feet. 1 set was consistent with a size 12 Hush Puppy brand style shoe. Additional impressions were made by a different shoe type consistent with a size 10 Airfit or Franklin athletic shoe. Also in the office, the home computer search history was analyzed. Internet searches for purses were made on the night before Jason left. Also, MapQuest inquiries for directions between Raleigh and Clintwood, Virginia, where Jason was traveling. At an undetermined time, internet searches were made on the Youngs' home computer for anatomy of a knockout, head trauma blackout, head blow knockout, and head trauma. The news of Michelle's death reached Jason Young at his parents' home in North Carolina. Jason's sales trip in Virginia had brought him close to home, so he decided to visit and spend the night after his sales calls were complete. His mother and his stepfather waited for his arrival in person to give him the news. He arrived sometime later in the afternoon and appeared shocked and devastated when told about Michelle. As he and his family made the 4-hour drive back to Raleigh, a close friend of his, Ryan, had called and told him that the police were asking a lot of questions about him. Jason made the decision then not to speak with the police. He retained a criminal lawyer and refused to answer any questions. There were a handful of obvious reasons to immediately place Jason under suspicion despite his apparent alibi on a work trip, and his refusal to offer even basic information about his wife that could aid in the initial steps of the investigation helped the case against him. First, he is the husband, and the couple made no secret of their marital struggles. They often fought in public and shared their troubles with friends and family. Jason's infidelities were not well concealed, and his cell phone records showed as many calls home to his wife as to his girlfriend. More on that later. That whoever had brutally killed Michelle also took the time to clean up Cassidy seemed to also point in Jason's direction. The internet searches retrieved on the home computer were also curious. And the closet door left open held his clothing, which investigators surmised was likely a sign of him grabbing a change of clothes after the attack. Upon his arrival in Raleigh, police seized his vehicle, a white Ford Explorer. They also returned to his hotel room at the Hampton Court Inn in Hillsville, Virginia, where he had checked in the night before. There were no traces of blood found in either Jason's SUV or in his hotel room. Forensic analysts were unable to link any fibers from the hotel to the crime scene in Michelle and Jason's master bedroom. Testing of Jason's clothing and his luggage found within his vehicle also failed to return any links. His fingerprints were found in the bedroom, of course, although none of his fingerprints contained blood. Forensic analysis of the hair found with Michelle did not match Jason. Jason was examined by officers of the Wake County Sheriff's Office on the 7th of November, and he did not have any cuts, bruises, or other injuries to his hands or body, aside from a bruised and broken toenail. What investigators did retrieve from the vehicle did not help their case. First, they found a pair of hush puppy shoes size 12, but they did not fit the prints at the scene. In his SUV, investigators also found the hotel receipt from the Hampton Inn that had been slipped under Jason's room door between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. the night before, as well as the hotel-labeled copy of that day's USA Today newspaper, both inarguable evidence that Jason had been in his room in Virginia that morning. All of that meant that if Jason had committed the murder, he had to have done so within a strict window of time. Investigators set out to prove the theory that Jason had left the hotel at midnight, made the 170-mile trip back to Raleigh, murdered his wife, cleaned up his daughter, and then returned back to the Hampton Inn early that morning. The murder investigation lasted 3 years. Jason was indicted on first-degree murder charges on the 14th of December 2009 and went to trial at Wake County Superior Court on the 11th of May 2011. There was no direct physical evidence linking Jason to the crime. There were 6 fingerprints that remained unidentified. The missing pieces of jewelry, including Michelle's wedding rings, were never located, nor was there a murder weapon. There were, however, some curious circumstances surrounding Jason's timeline on the night of the murder that had investigators convinced that he was covering his steps. Jason Young purchased gasoline in Raleigh at approximately 7:30 p.m. on the 2nd of November 2006, and then went to a Cracker Barrel restaurant in Greensboro for dinner, leaving at 9:25 p.m. Jason is seen checking into his room at the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, Virginia at 10:54 p.m. Data from the keycards used to gain access to the hotel rooms showed that he entered his room at 10:56 p.m. and did not use his keycard to re-enter his hotel room for the remainder of his stay. Jason had started a new role selling electronic healthcare record software, and he was still getting his footing, so he says he spent about an hour in his room reviewing his notes and his pitch for the next morning. He realizes that he has left his laptop charger in the car, so he exits the room and goes out a side exit door to the parking lot. Since the exit door could not be opened from the exterior without a keycard, and he had left his keycard in his room, Jason broke a stick off a nearby shrub and stuck it in the door while he went to retrieve his charger. At about midnight, Jason is captured again by security cameras in the hotel, this time at the front desk and then walking down a hallway that leads to stairs and an exit door. He has purchased a cigar and a newspaper and was headed outside to smoke it. Jason says he again propped open a side door with a small stick from the flower bed so that he could easily slip back inside when he was finished his cigar. Similarly, it was possible to close the door to the hotel room such that it appeared shut but would push back open without the use of the keycard. Firmly closing the doors made a bit of noise, and not wishing to disturb his neighbors, Jason opted for leaving his door slightly ajar in this manner so that he could slip out with his cigar and newspaper and then back in around midnight. If Jason did not slip back into his room and instead went directly to his vehicle for the drive back to Raleigh, he would have had approximately 2.5 to 3 hours to drive from Hillsville to Raleigh, arriving at his home at roughly 3 a.m. Early in the morning on the 3rd of November, Hampton Inn clerk Keith Hicks noticed that the emergency door on the first floor at the western end of the hotel was propped open with a small red rock. Mr. Hicks removed the rock and shut the door. When Mr. Hicks returned to the front desk and reviewed the hotel's surveillance cameras, he noticed that the camera was malfunctioning in the same stairwell where the door was left ajar.
Or anywhere between 4 or 5 a.m., I noticed that the camera was unplugged, facing to an emergency exit door. So when I went around to do the papers and deliver the papers, I went up to the first floor, into the first floor hallway, went through the exit door, and noticed that the emergency door was propped open with a rock. And emergency doors, you can only access from the inside. You can't get it back in from the outside. So I thought it was weird that they were propped open. I also thought it was weird the camera was unplugged.
What did you do then when you noticed this rock in the you said this was an emergency exit door?
Yeah, I just kicked the door back. I kicked the rock out so the door was shut. And then I informed the maintenance of the camera issue, and then we got that fixed.
I'm sorry, could you see though that it was unplugged from where you were?
Yeah, you can see it from the bottom. You can see the wire in the back was pulled out.
Hicks asked a maintenance worker, Elmer Goad, to plug the camera in again. Mr. Goad testified that if someone were 6 feet tall, they would be able to easily reach the camera's plug. The last image from the camera was at 11:19 p.m. on the 2nd of November, and no images were recorded until 5:50 a.m. on the 3rd of November when Mr. Goad got a stepladder and plugged the camera in again. The camera worked properly from 5:50 a.m. until 6:34 a.m., but then at 6:35 a.m., the camera was pointed at the ceiling. Mr. Goad put the camera back in position and focused it on the bottom of the stairs a few minutes later.
Anywhere 15-20 minutes later, that while the breakfast lady was setting up her breakfast and everything was going on in the morning, I looked back at the monitor, and the same camera had been shoved up into the roof.
Now, explain what you mean to this jury about shoved up into the roof.
Someone had come in, I'm assuming it's whoever unplugged the camera, and seen that the camera was unplugged and did not want to be seen, and they took their hand and they shoved it up into the ceiling.
The hotel said the camera was never unplugged previously, and that the only other time that the camera was tampered with was several years prior when some guests snuck in and out of the exit door. The camera issues at the Hampton Inn meant, if nothing else, that Jason could have slipped out and back into the hotel unnoticed. There was not, however, anything linking him to the camera tampering. Jason was not shown on any of the images before the camera went offline, for example. There was a single fingerprint pulled from the affected camera, but it also did not match Jason's. 3 women from Jason's love life took the stand at his trial. His former fiancée testified that he had forcibly removed her engagement ring from her finger. She said she was left shocked and bruised from the incident.
Said something to the effect of, well, if I'm going to make such a terrible husband, then give me back my ring. And it went on for probably about 20 minutes. He cut my finger getting the ring off. Once I told my parents what he'd done to me, there was no way they would ever let me follow through on the wedding. So I told them, and then mulled it over for a couple days, and then I sent Jason an email and called off the wedding. It just blew my mind that he didn't care. No remorse whatsoever.
The jury also heard from 2 women with whom Jason had cheated on Michelle during their 3-year marriage. Carol Sowerby, a family friend, regretfully recounted a night spent with Jason Young when Michelle had been out of town. Perhaps the most damning evidence came from Michelle Money, a former sorority sister of Michelle's who was having problems in her own marriage. She and Jason had begun communicating regularly in September of 2006. In October of that year, over the week of Michelle and Jason's 3rd wedding anniversary, Jason spent a week with Michelle Money at her home in Florida. Around this time, he also admitted to a friend that he believed he was in love with her.
You actually engaged in an affair with the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
In addition to his infidelities, the prosecution was able to paint Jason as a less-than-loving father. When Meredith testified, she explained that for years she and the rest of Michelle's family had fought a legal battle with Jason over access to Cassidy. But as negotiations were reaching their conclusion, Jason made a surprising decision.
Any attempts to talk to Cassidy on the phone, schedule a visit, cards that we sent, gifts that we sent were returned to sender, completely cut off. I thought we were about to reach an agreement for a visitation schedule, which is about a weekend every month and then about a week over the summer. and we had agreed upon what weekends those would be for the schedule kind of throughout the year. And my attorney called us into the office to sit and review kind of the final copy, and everything was as we agreed upon, January this weekend, February this weekend, and then come August 1st, that primary custody would be transferred to me. She would start school in Wake County. She would live with me on a full-time basis, and he would kind of be an every other weekend schedule to visit her.
And so in terms of this custody situation, did that come as a surprise to you?
Very much so.
In addition to receiving full custody of Cassidy, Michelle's family also filed a successful civil suit against Jason for Michelle's death. The standard for these suits is far lower than that of reasonable doubt in a criminal court. Jason did not fight the civil suit, which resulted in a default judgment against him. The amount of damages announced at that time was $15 million. When the time came for the defense to present its evidence, they aimed first to cast doubt on the prosecution's timeline, which placed Jason back at his home in Raleigh by about 3 a.m. A neighbor of the Youngs, Cindy Beaver, testified that she saw a light-colored SUV or similar type of larger vehicle exiting the Youngs' driveway at about 5:20 a.m. on the night of the murder.
The car was coming out of the driveway, facing forward. It wasn't like somebody was backing into the street. It was as if they were going to pull out face forward.
And this was at 5108 Birchley?
Yes,
About what time of morning was this?
That was probably around 5:20 or so, 5:25, something like that. There's a little bit of a curve before you straighten back up again. And my bright lights hit the car. And there was two people in the car, a driver and a passenger. The passenger, I assumed, was a woman. I don't know. When my bright lights hit the passenger, that person quickly jerked their head away. It was, very obvious. And my first concern was, oh gosh, I've just blinded this person.
What type of car? Can you describe that?
Well, to me, it reminded me of a soccer mom car. It was not a station wagon. It wasn't a sedan. It was one of those vehicles like you carry kids around in or something.
Okay.
I'm not good at cars either. I'm sorry.
Okay. What about the driver? Did you see anything?
Yes, as I went on by, I was embarrassed about what had happened. So I purposely looked over to the end of the driveway where they are. I didn't know whether I should apologize or wave or say something, good morning, or whatever, or what I might be met with either. But I looked, and there the driver was a white male, and I remember very vividly had his hands on the steering wheel like this.
If the vehicle that Cindy spotted on Birchleaf Drive at the Young house at 5:20 a.m. was connected to the murder, it would have been impossible for the white man she spotted inside to have been Jason Young. By 5:20 a.m., he would have had to have been back en route to the Hampton Inn in Virginia. The defense also called a newspaper delivery person that testified they drove past the Young house at 3:50 a.m. that morning and saw nothing. We know that Jason retrieved his checkout receipt from the hotel that had been slipped under his door in the early morning. Although the camera failed to show when he actually left, his cell phone records show a call to his mother at 7:40 a.m. using a cell tower in Whiteville, Virginia, on his way to his meeting. A key piece of the prosecution's puzzle was placing Jason on the roads in between the hours of midnight and 6:30 a.m. And they had this missing piece, they said, when the gas attendant who worked at the Four Brothers BP station took the stand. Gracie Calhoun had been monitoring the gas pumps at Four Brothers, located in King, North Carolina that night, which is located at an exit along the direct route between Raleigh and Hillsville. Gracie testified that a man driving a white SUV pulled up to the farthest pump at approximately 5 to 5:30 a.m. and made repeated efforts to pump gas. After the man entered the store and cursed her because the pumps were not operational, Ms. Calhoun told the customer that at that time of day, customers must provide money or identification before the gasoline pumps would be activated. At that point, the man, who Ms. Calhoun identified from a photograph presented to her as Jason Young, threw $20 in cash at her and returned to the pump, pumped $15 worth of gasoline into his vehicle before driving off without collecting his change. To dispute Gracie's eyewitness testimony, Jason's defense team did the math. They tracked all of the gas receipts from the days prior to the murder and the night of the 3rd of November to determine how many miles per gallon is an average for Jason's Ford Explorer. They start with the full tank on the day before, which is an undisputed fact, and then track the distance he drove from his home in Raleigh to Greensboro for dinner, then on to the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, and up to the sales call at Dickinson Community Hospital the next morning. Then they add up the trip that the prosecution claims he made, including the $15 of gasoline purchased at the Four Brothers BP at 5 a.m. In the first scenario, the mileage aligns exactly, but in the second, the math just doesn't add up, they say.
This is Jason's first tank of gas. He stopped at the Handy Hugo's and filled up. Doesn't matter how much gas he got at the Handy Hugo's, it just matters that he filled up. What's the last miles per gallon? 19.55. Think about this, ladies and gentlemen. He didn't have any reason to try to be hiding any gas. He didn't have any reason to pay for any gas that day with cash or stop at some strange place. He's not trying to hide where he is on this day. And look what that adds up to. 19.51. That verifies that the gas mileage I told you that looked like it might be a little much on his trip up there is not much at all. That's what that car was getting. It was getting 19.5 miles to the gallon. And think about this, if you're trying to hide yourself, you really don't want to run out of gas. You're not going to stretch it as far as you can. You're going to stop when your gas light comes on. If he used every drop of gas in that car, that's 20.386 miles to the gallon. And that doesn't seem like a whole lot more than 19.5 until you do this math. He would have run out of gas 18.8 miles before he got there. And been sitting on the side of the road.
When Jason took the stand in his own defense in June 2011, it was the first time he would tell his side of the story. He admits he is guilty of affairs, but not of murder.
Did her getting pregnant cause you to get married?
No, it didn't cause us to get married. It certainly expedited the marriage. It sped up.
It happened sooner?
Absolutely. It made it happen. It made it happen sooner. I think it was eventually going to happen on my schedule. It would have probably been stretched out a little more. On her schedule, it would have probably been a little sooner. So it expedited both of those schedules. I remember Cassidy, in the toddling stage, toddling into the den, and she had a shirt on that Michelle bought that said, "I'm going to be a big sister," and I don't even think, just being the non-pay attention person, I don't even think it hit me at first. I remember just seeing more Cassidy and kind of thinking, playing with Cassidy, and Michelle was looking at me kind of like excited-wise, and I remember looking again, and I was thrilled.
The result was a hung jury. 8 jurors voted to acquit Jason, and 4 to convict of first-degree murder. The state chose to retry the case promptly the following year. In the retrial, the judge allowed evidence relating to the result of the civil case from a few years prior. The same judge that oversaw that civil case also sat for the criminal retrial in 2012. This judge had submitted an opinion in the civil case that Jason was the slayer, a term used in civil law to judge Jason as the murderer of his wife. The jury heard this testimony.
There is an alleged paragraph 6, again reading verbatim from the record. In the early morning hours of November 3rd, 2006, Jason Young brutally murdered Michelle Young at their residence. Was a judgment entered? Yes.
Signed by the Superior Court judge, a judgment declaring within the civil statute this defendant, Jason Young, to be the slayer, that is, that he unlawfully killed Michelle Marie Fisher Young, within the definition of slayer in the civil law. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In the second trial, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Jason Young was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
When you thought, oh, it's all coming together, When Jason had to go give his NSO, the non-testimonial order, and had to go down to the Wake County Sheriff's Department, and they took photos of his body, and he didn't have a scratch, a bruise, nothing on him, it was going to be really hard for me to find him guilty. I guess really then on Friday, before we went to deliberate, he gave out about a 6-page a document saying, certain parts of the law that we could use, and circumstantial evidence, there was a mountain of it. There was no direct evidence, directly linking him to the crime. We went through the timeline, the gas mileage, and it all worked out, whether it was him or not.
Do you think that he had unplugged the camera?
Yes.
Have and probably had help. Probably did have help. That's what we had surmised.
An appeal was filed by Jason's defense team after the conviction, arguing that the judgment from the civil case and the arrangements for custody of little Cassidy should never have been admitted at the second trial.
As far as the issue of the evidence at trial, I think we know it's prejudicial because we already had a test case. We had the first trial, 8 people voted not guilty, 4 people voted guilty, and the only substantive evidence reviewing the record that changed in the second trial was the wrongful death slayer evidence and the child custody complaint. And the verdict went from 8-4 to 12-0.
His team won this appeal, and Jason was initially awarded a new trial. However, in May 2015, the state Supreme Court overturned this decision. And that's the story of Michelle Young and the conviction of her husband, Jason. Thanks so much for joining me to examine this case once again. I'm Kevin, this is Just Thought Lounge, and I'll see you in the next one.